Awesome sauce. I think we're all here. So I'm going to turn the program over to Lauren Enlow. Lauren, if you want to also introduce yourself because we did to all of our participants.
Well, hello, everyone. My name is Lauren Enlow. I'm the Associate Director of Alumni Relations here at Penn State Abington. And I'm so happy to have moderating abilities for this panel. We have a dynamic panel of awesome women that are out here in the world doing great things. And they are here to share with you a little bit about their life experiences. Feel free to use the chat box to ask any questions that you may have. We do have a preset list of questions, but I know there are things that are burning in your hearts that you want to ask, so please use the chat to do that. And I will go ahead and get started. For the panelists, I'd love for you all to introduce yourselves and then answer the question, what are some tips that our students can use to stand out during an interview? And I will start with Alex.
Hey guys, I'm Alex Cram. I work for Warner Music Group and I head up the global brand licensing and retail division for a department called Warner Music Artist Services. We are a centralized department within Warner Music Group, and we work across all of the labels under the umbrella, such as Atlantic Records and Warner Records. And we help all the artists that are signed to the labels maximize and monetize their rights outside of the music space. So you can see behind me some of the products that my team has helped bring to life with regards to collaborations and retail programs. So as far as your question, Lauren, what are some tips to stand out in the interview process? I would say when I'm interviewing people, I think it's helpful if the person comes prepared with having read the job description, but also have done a bit of due diligence on their own with regards to research about the company, about some of the folks that we work with and represent, some of the programs and products we put out into the marketplace, and just kind of knowing the full context, even if you don't know the full opportunity of the role itself, doing a bit of a deep dive and exploration. Google is your best friend. It'll help prepare you with more pointed questions and kind of contextualize the interview a bit more. And so my favorite interviews are ones where folks come prepared with really specific questions, not just general ones. It shows to me that they've done their research, and I really appreciate that because it creates more of a dialogue between myself and the interviewee.
And Tina.
Thank you, Lauren. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Tina Hennessy. I'm the Associate Vice President for University Development at Penn State. I'm a Penn State alumna and a proud Penn State Abington alumna, having attended there for 3 semesters before I moved to University Park, graduating in 1993. I work in fundraising and alumni relations for the university. I transitioned to that type of work after I left a newspaper career where I had been for 10 years. So I've been at Penn State for 12 years, and I lead 14 teams at the university, including Penn State Abington, both of our law schools, and a number of colleges and campuses. So I'm really happy to be here today. Regarding standing out during interviews, obviously everything Alex said is really important, and I think we probably should get a stipend from Google, because I was going to add that into my answer as well. I think you also, though, more subjectively want to know what your story is, and you really need to own everything about your story. Be prepared to discuss it. So an example I've thought of as I was preparing this was really around, if you're going to apply for a position that is outside of your major, for example, I think you really want to know, what is the story about why this makes sense for you and why you're a strong candidate. You can't shy away in an interview from the challenges that are there. The person interviewing you is going to know what those challenges are. So what you need to do is lean into that and be able to talk about it really well. The Google piece for me was Googling interview questions and practicing, knowing what you're going to say and being really comfortable with that. I just think that really people who are authentic during the interview, that comes across, and that's about who you are and what your story is.
Linda? Linda, you're still muted.
There we go. Good afternoon. My name is Linda Williams, and I also am a proud Penn State grad. Did start also at Abington and move on to University Park. I currently work for Wells Fargo, and I work in the International Check Collections Division, where I manage a team that handles foreign objects or foreign items to be collected. So we work with different countries. We work with Australia, Hong Kong, European countries, all to secure and to collect on documents that transpose between our customers back and forth. I also am on the Alumni Advisory Board, so I work with the new chancellor and worked with the previous chancellor on programs that will hopefully help the students, and our ultimate goal is for our students to be successful, and this is one of the forums that we can help that come to pass. As far as interviewing, obviously I echo what has been said previously, and I would add to that there are some real basics that you don't want to take for granted in an interview. For example, you want to make sure that your grammar is good, your diction is good, you articulate very well, you don't do a lot of using ums and ahs and things like that. Those things distract from your answer, and they will take your interviewer's attention away and put it on those things. Also, you want to be sure that you think about your answer. I'm a proponent of not just jumping in and start talking, but to take a moment, take a few seconds and think about your answer, organize it well so you're not rambling on and on. The worst thing is to ask a question and the person just rambles and they haven't even answered the question. So those are just basic things. And of course, now in this era of COVID, all interviews will be video, and that presents other challenges. You want to make sure that the room is quiet. You want to make sure that the background is okay. Small things that you may not think of, but are very important in the impression that you'll make with that person who's talking with you.
Very true, Linda. Very, very true. Katrina?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I am Katrina Lukach. I work for NASDAQ. I am the head of market operations for the options exchanges. NASDAQ runs currently 6 options exchanges out of 16 that is in the industry. I previously, before NASDAQ, I was working for ISE, which was the first all-electronic options exchange. And during my time there, we had launched another 2 exchanges. So we had 3, and then NASDAQ came in June of 2016 and purchased the ISE exchanges. So that's a little bit about my history. Prior to that, I was a stockbroker for a number of years for a discount brokerage firm. During that time, I got several licenses. That was my 7 and 63, and then also the options principal and the general securities and the prop trading. So I have a kind of a long history within the financial industries. Some of the things that I think stand out during an interview for me is being personable, is really connecting with the person that is interviewing with you, and also for them to show you what their personality is so that you know what you're getting when they come in and they start to learn what it is that we do. I work in a very specific portion of the industry. So there aren't a lot of people that come to me that have the experience that I need on my desk in order to support the markets. What we do is we train people to do that, but you have to be able to come in and articulate that even if you're not familiar with the subject or what it is that's going to be asked of you, you have the desire to learn it, that you are driven in order to perform and learn all of the things that you need to do to function effectively, and be able to own up sometimes and say, I don't know everything that I need to know for this job, but I'm willing to learn. And taking that initiative and drive and showing it to the individual that's interviewing you so that they know that they're getting somebody that's going to be a hard worker and dedicated to learning the tasks at hand and performing it well.
Katrina, that's an excellent point. You don't know everything when you start a new job, and having that ability to say, I don't know something, but I'm willing to learn can get you really far. And it looks like Donna has been able to get over her tech issues. Hello, Donna, if you want to take just a second to introduce yourself and answer the question, what are some tips that our students can use during the interview process?
Yeah, thanks very much, Lauren, and thanks for the invite today. So my name is Donna Marin. I am a 1987 graduate from Penn State. My undergrad is in biology. I have a master's in quality assurance and regulatory affairs from Temple. I try not to admit that, but anyway, I work at Merck, which is a pharmaceutical company. My current role is Director and Compliance Officer in Merck Research Lab. So I support the research division of Merck. Specifically, my client groups include the group that does clinical research, also the regulatory affairs group, as well as the Center for Observational Research and Real World Evidence. And I've been at the company for, it was 32 years at the end of last month, and I've held a number of positions in the company in different areas. So I came in as a biologist. I moved to some other roles in the regulatory affairs organization, and then ultimately into a compliance role. So I have had the opportunity over the years to hire new folks into the whatever group I was in at the time. So in terms of suggestions for interviews, I think the points that I heard that were raised already, I would certainly agree with those, in particular in today's environment with a virtual interview. And if this hadn't been mentioned already, I would also encourage you to do your homework. So to the extent that you can, look into, do your homework on the company, try to have, basic knowledge of what they do, recognizing you're not going to know necessarily about the position. So even in my 32 years at Merck, there are a number of roles within the company, because it's so big, that I have no idea about, and I'll be the first one to tell you that. But I think, as I heard Katrina describe, to the extent that you don't know, right? But think of, be able to think of examples, because a lot of times you might get questions of, tell me a time when you made a mistake and what you did about it, or how something that happened. What did you learn from that? How did that alter your, the way you approach things moving forward? So being able to think about some challenges that you've had, whether it's in your academic career or in employment that you've had along the way, being able to kind of link those to the position that you're interviewing for, even though, again, the roles won't quite line up, but being able to link that experience. So where you had to learn something new, right? How you approach that, to make that connection with the hiring manager, and again, being personable, right? So, trying to do what you can, given the environment, to make that personal connection, to demonstrate why they should hire you for the role, and how you have that interest and that dedication to do it well.
All right, thank you, Donna. Our next question is for Tina. What was the biggest barrier for entry into the workforce when you first got out of school?
That is a good question. I think for me and for many students, there's a real barrier that exists for those of us who don't have natural mentors in our lives to help us navigate the professional world. And so I think about college students like myself, whose parents were not professionals. My parents worked, but they did not have jobs that required college degrees. And so I didn't get the regular instruction from my parents, and I didn't have people around me who could help me with those issues that are really issues of social capital. How do you navigate these spaces? How do you appropriately write thank you letters? How do you accept or decline a job offer? Those barriers were very real. How do you dress professionally when you don't have any money to buy those clothes, and how do you figure that out? I think programs like this panel are really instrumental in helping bridge that gap for students who don't necessarily have those people easily accessible to them day to day. And so I really appreciate that you're doing this. And I think even for students who do maybe have access to professionals in their lives every day, they may not be comfortable asking the questions they need to ask to really, overcome those hurdles and make it into their first job confidently and successfully. So this is an opportunity for that as well. I hope that gets at your question, Lauren.
Definitely does. My next question is for Alex. What are some tips in finding your leadership voice?
I would say practice. So there's nothing like real world experience, whether that is in a study group and, you know, everyone is kind of hemming and hawing about the next step. You could have the opportunity to kind of step up and take a leadership position in that position, whether it's an internship. I think just being flung into certain scenarios helps you ultimately craft your voice and figure out your strong suit and kind of where you want your voice to take you. Is it right at the head of the line and kind of leading from the top down? Is it more from, you know, unilaterally, like leading as a peer? There's so many different ways to approach leadership. And I think you don't discover the type of leader that you are until you actually put yourself in the position to rise to be one. And it appears in everyday life in very simple ways. So I think we often think of leadership and we hold it on this pedestal of something that is, you know, difficult to attain, or it comes with a certain title or a certain, you know, time in your career, when in fact you can craft it and curate your leadership voice on a daily basis. So I think stepping out of your comfort zone is a good way of experiencing that and getting the opportunity to kind of feel a different space to be in, working with people that you wouldn't typically work with. So stepping out of your peer group as well, which is also similar to stepping out of your comfort zone. I think trying new opportunities, whether it's a new class or a new opportunity on the internship side of things. I think there's so many different ways that you can approach that. And I think your leadership voice is something that is ongoing. It's a living thing in some ways inside of you that you can continue to craft given the different opportunities that come your way.
Excellent point. The students, I hope you heard her say, step out of your comfort zone, try something new, something different, whether it's a new class or joining a club that you didn't necessarily think you'd be interested in. Just try something new. My next question is for Katrina. What is it like working in such a male-dominated environment?
That's an interesting question that I've been mulling for the last few days, just thinking about it and trying to figure out, you know, what is the best answer for that. When I first started and I had gotten my licenses and I was a stockbroker, there were only a handful of women on the floor for the firm that I worked for. And then as I moved on in my career and I got more licenses and I became more seasoned, I guess you would say, as a stockbroker, and then I moved into the options role at ISC, there weren't a whole lot of women in the meetings that I were going to. And I would look around the room and I would say early on to myself, I'm the only woman in this room and there are 15 other bodies in here and they're all men. And it was unique, and it didn't bother me because I felt as if I had earned my place at the table and that I was there for a reason. And it was because I had learned all sorts of tasks and I had matured in my role. And then that's the reason why I was there at that table. And so I would say it is interesting to see now that there are a lot more women at the table in these meetings, and that there are women doing different roles. And so at first it was, I wouldn't say daunting, it was challenging to have to be the only woman at that table and in that role. But during the years, I've seen how it's opened up and there are a lot more women there. And so I think it speaks to the fortitude that women have, that they are anxious and interested in doing all sorts of things that they didn't used to do necessarily, or they weren't accepted in doing, but that the world is opening up and it is allowing for a lot more women to participate in these conversations. So I think it takes a lot of strength if you are in a role where you're surrounded by a lot of men, but if you show your your knowledge, if you're strong and you are and you know how to express your opinion in the right way so that it's taken seriously, I think you'll go far. So it helped me grow very much as an individual, and I'm happy for the experience.
Go ahead, Linda. I see you have something to add.
Thank you. I just wanted to add a point also. I think, and I appreciate Katrina's response, and I concur with everything she said. I would also add that it's similar to being the only person of color in a room. I know when I was coming up, not only was I the only woman in many of the boardroom situations, I was the only person of color. So I had that kind of double thing going. And I would say for any of those types of challenges, what you want to also always be concerned with is your performance, your own performance. If you are doing well at what you're doing and you're moving up, you know, there's all kinds of ways to address those issues. I also would mention that many of the companies now have what they call team member networks that are groups of like-minded employees that are able to provide mentors and guides. There may be a women's group. I know at Wells Fargo, we have a women's group. We also have a people of color group. We have probably 18 different groups. So I would search those out. If you find yourself in a company and you find yourself having difficulty with that, search out those groups and search out those mentors. But again, above all else, just maintain your level of performance. Make sure you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, and be strong, as Katrina said. Seek out those mentors, and that's very, very helpful as you navigate into waters that may have been previously uncharted by people who look like you.
That actually leads into my next question for you, Linda. How has working with other women across the world contributed to your own personal growth?
Well, it's interesting because in my role, I deal with women in many, many countries, most notably Europe, probably the most, and probably Hong Kong second to that. So when you talk with women, you find, you know, unsurprisingly to me, that we're pretty much the same everywhere. We're all, you know, a lot of us have families and we're trying to work. A lot of us are, you know, trying to find that balance, which I was listening to in an article this morning where, you know, that balance really doesn't exist between work and life. It's just not there, but we're all trying to do that. So we find that when you speak to women who are in other countries, the work ethic might be different, the work process, the methods might be different, but the challenges are pretty much the same because women are coming up in a lot of industries all over the world. So it's not just American women who are taking the forefront and stepping forward. There are women in Hong Kong who are taking leadership roles where, you know, that was not always smiled upon. There are women in Europe who are handling, you know, very, very large companies and they're growing. So when you have the advantage of being able to work with women in different countries, it gives you added insight into what's going on around the world, and you find your similarities and you also find some of your differences, but more so you find your similarities and you can develop a network and a relationship group.
So this question is for the entire panel. I'm going to start with Donna. What has been one of the hardest challenges you've had to face in your career, and how did you overcome that?
Oh, that's a good question. I was hoping you wouldn't ask me that one. Anyway, I don't know. That one's hard. I can't really think of one in particular because from a work perspective, you know, I would say, except for starting out. So I think the question that was asked earlier about, you know, sort of getting started, right? So when you don't have any experience and you're applying for positions, entry-level positions at a company, like how do you get in the door? They want somebody with experience. How do I get experience? You want to hire me, right? So, you know, so that maybe, but from my perspective, the way I overcame that was like, keep knocking on the door, right? Sort of keep trying. And as I'm thinking it through a bit now, you know, another sort of along the same theme, when I was early on at Merck, the first position that I had as a biologist, I did that for about 3 years. And honestly, I got a little bored with it. So I was looking for other opportunities, and in particular on the clinical research side, and I would apply for positions and I didn't get a call, didn't get an interview. So that's frustrating, but I think it's a little bit of a never give up, sort of message there. Ultimately, there were some positions that opened up in the adverse experience reporting group, and I applied for those. And I did get some interviews there. But the first time I interviewed, I didn't get the job. Second time I interviewed, I didn't get the job. But the third time I interviewed, I got the job. So three times was a charm in that instance. And then actually, I think, kind of as Linda mentioned, once I got there, I, did my thing. I put my head down, I learned the role. And then I actually ended up taking on additional responsibilities that people that had, gotten those earlier jobs that I didn't get, they weren't doing. And I ended up kind of doing a lot on my team. So, so it's one of those, like, keep knocking on the door, keep trying. And then once you get in the door, then, kind of do what you can to knock their socks off. So that's what I would say to that one.
Perseverance is very important.
Exactly. Don't be discouraged.
So let's go to Alex. What's one of the hardest challenges you've had to face, and how did you overcome it?
I think for me, if I look back at my career, probably the biggest challenge I had to face was myself and just kind of getting out of my own way. I left college. I got accepted into a pretty awesome, I guess you could say, internship or apprenticeship. It was called the Summer Associate Program at MTV Networks at the time. And I landed at Nickelodeon, and I helped kind of grow with their consumer products division and working with SpongeBob and Dora and all of these great things. And even though it wasn't what I originally set out to do, I originally wanted to be in the live production space. I kind of justified it as, this is production, it's just in the physical form, and the road to the finish line is a bit longer than producing a live event. And so I stayed there, and I created a goal for myself, and I said, okay, I want to become a vice president. So I was basically starting as a summer associate, and I said, I want to be a vice president. I want to be one of the youngest vice presidents in this company. And so I worked there. I pretty much grew up there career-wise. I stayed for about 11 years. I became vice president. I worked in a number of different roles and wore a lot of different hats. And then it got to a point where going to work every day, I wasn't excited. I didn't have the passion or the pep in my step. And I'd just gotten a raise, and I just gotten new responsibility. And from the outside looking in, it would seem as though I had the best job, and why would I even contemplate giving that up? And that was really challenging for me for about a year, because I was very privileged to be in that position, and I had earned it, but what else could I do? And so, I ended up taking a trip to Peru and kind of going on the Inca Trail and hiking for 3 days, and came back and quit my job. And everyone thought I was crazy. And I thought I might have been a little bit crazy. I had no job to back up on. I had nothing to fall back on. And I said, you know what, I just needed to do this, because if I wasn't going to do it, I would have spent every day going back and forth on myself. And I think for me, that trip, what it symbolized and what I learned was that fear was holding me back, fear of moving on, because I'd stayed at the company for so long right out of school. I had all this deep set fear that I don't think I actually realized with regards to, what if I have to start all over again at a new company? What if I don't have the, political capital of the company that I do here at Nickelodeon? And, what is my network going to look like? And so I decided, though, that ultimately I didn't want to be in a 9-to-5 and working for a big company. I wanted to do something on my own, and I wanted to take and try my hand at kind of running my own agency. And so I stepped out of my own way, and I leaned on my network, which I didn't realize how big it was until I finally left, and how many people were in my corner. And I started my own agency. And that was probably my biggest challenge, was taking that leap into my own business without a safety net, quite frankly. So that's it in a nutshell.
All right, let's go to Tina.
Thanks, Lauren. I would probably have some of the same themes that's probably going to be common to all of us. I thought about the biggest challenges I've faced, honestly, to some extent, going away to college, starting my own business, having that business fail, transitioning into development, and all of those things jump out at me. And when I think about them, and then I think about what helped me overcome them, it all comes down to taking risks and putting yourself outside your comfort zone. I feel like if you're weighing, and Alex just talked about this, you're weighing something important, and maybe you're looking at two different paths. The hard one is usually the right one. The one that makes you feel like, wow, that's a little uncomfortable. That is very often the one that you probably have to lean into. I was in a meeting this morning, and somebody quoted American Idol, although I don't think this quote sounds too familiar to have originated there. I don't watch American Idol, but it's something about life begins at the end of your comfort zone. And that's, I think, what we're talking about. So overcoming challenges in your professional life is often about pushing yourself outside your comfort zone. For me, definitely pushing myself outside my comfort zone, taking risks that seemed, unimaginable, and then also committing to that, jumping in, really saying, I'm gonna follow this where it's gonna take me. And maybe I have a trap door. I know what's gonna happen if this doesn't go well, but I'm gonna be all in. And so, I think that's how you overcome the challenges. The challenges are gonna be there no matter what, and they're gonna change at every stage of your professional life, your career. It's gonna change with your personal life. But that approach to overcoming those challenges, as you practice that and get better at it, is what's going to really carry you through.
Katrina?
So when I think about this, I often go back to the same thought. And the biggest challenge that I had was when I first started at ISE. So I went from being a stockbroker, something that I knew, to working for an exchange. And there was a big challenge there for me because, as I had mentioned before, it really is a very nuanced position, and not a whole lot of people in the United States have a job such as I have. And I was going into a new environment, and there were all men on my team that I was joining. And I was there for the first day, and I went home and I said to my mom, I can't do this job. I can't do this. I don't know what's going on. It's new to me. It's the tools are different. The lingo is different. There's all sorts of things, and I just don't think I'm going to be successful at this. And my mother said, you're crazy. You think that because you're overwhelmed, but if you just give yourself some time and you take a deep breath and you think about it, you'll be okay. So I think the challenge was that I was going into a new position that was unbeknownst to me, and I had to make it my own. And I learned that once I can let go of that fear of the unknown and what it is that I needed to learn in order to do that job well, once I let go of that fear and open myself up, I realized that I was very successful in that role, that I had learned so much, that I allowed myself to make some mistakes and learn from those mistakes and become stronger for it. And I never made the same mistake twice because I learned from it, and I said, all right, this is on me this time. I can't have this happen again. And so when you find your strength and recognize what you don't know, as I said before, and understanding what it is that you need to learn, and you open yourself up to those that are willing to show you and teach you, and you learn from them, I think that's important. So that was the biggest challenge. But once I started to allow myself to learn the role, I was great at it. And that's because it is shown in the fact that I have achieved the position that I'm in today, and running these 6 options markets and having several different teams reporting to me. I've earned that. And so I think that was a really big challenge for me, but I really learned a lot from it.
I think we all need that person sometimes, whether it's mom, dad, uncle, teacher, that just says, take a deep breath, calm down for a minute. and then move forward. That deep breath a lot can happen in that deep breath where you gain your confidence and you can move forward. Before I move on to Linda to answer this question, I just want to remind everybody to use the chat and make sure you have clicked on to everyone so that we can all see it to ask any questions of the panelists. So Linda, go ahead. What were some challenges that you faced?
Sure, I was listening to the other distinguished panelists, and what kept coming into my mind was I had a goal when I first started college that I wanted to earn a PhD. And it was just one of those things that I thought, okay, this is great. This would be the optimum. This is the highest level. And I wanted to do that. And then, you know, I went to college. I graduated from Penn State. I got a good job. I got married. I had kids, you know, and life started to happen. And I'm thinking, you know, I won't be able to do this. But in working with my husband, who was very supportive of me, I was able to go back for my graduate degree, Master of Science, and I'm thinking, okay, this is good. This is better. You know, I'm happy. And then many years later, maybe 10 years later, I'm thinking, you know what? I still want to do that. I still think I can. So similar to what the other young ladies have said, it was a point that I decided, you know what, I want to do this. And so I applied and I said, well, if it's going to work for me, things will flow smoothly. And the application process flowed smoothly. I was accepted into the program. And 6 years later, I did attain a PhD. So it was one of those things where it was a difficult item to do. It seemed improbable. It seemed impossible. And I started to question myself and wonder why I even wanted to do that. But what I did was I kept moving toward it. And I did still work the entire time. So I did it part-time, which was difficult. And that was a huge challenge in and of itself. I had children, I had a family, I had other obligations, I had my job, I had a whole lot going on. But I was able to do that. And that was probably one of the biggest keystone events of my career, was indeed earning the PhD, which allowed me to do what I always wanted to do, which was to teach at a collegiate level. So I would say if you have those kinds of challenges that are getting in the way of your goals, you have to, as the other young lady said, you have to kind of dig deep and decide, is this what I really want? And it took me a long time to do it. And that's the other thing. We have to have patience and we have to have a plan to do it. It may not happen in 2 or 3 years. For me, my PhD journey took 6 years, which is actually about average, but it seemed like forever for me. So I would just encourage people who are listening to just go for what you want to do. Everybody may not be willing to take the risks that Alex took and that Tina took. You know, maybe some people can't take that type of a risk, but I would say don't be completely risk averse, but just, you know, grab that amount of risk that you think that you can handle so that you don't put too much pressure on yourself, and then just chip away at the goal, chip away at the goal, chip away at the goal. And that one day you'll wake up and you'll look up and you'll see that you've already attained it.
So I'm going to go to, this question is for Alex and Tina. This is from our chat room. Do you have a favorite book or a TED Talk or inspirational research or inspirational resource, excuse me, that you can recommend?
I'll jump in because I thought about this coming into this conversation. 2 books that I read that have definitely influenced me and helped me make some leaps and helped with my leadership. One is Lean In by Sheryl Sandberg. It's pretty dated at this point. I think it's probably I want to say almost 10 years old. I'm not positive about that. But at the time I read it, I was contemplating a move into leadership. And I was really struggling with the decision. I really wasn't sure what I should do. In this moment, I've been asked to apply for a job. And I had just started a year prior a role that I was really enjoying. And I read the book. And in that moment, I really found the inspiration to make the leap into leadership, which led to where I am right now. It led to the leadership position I had before I moved into a central leadership position. And there's lots of just little pieces of advice in there that can help people as they're making decisions in the workplace. Probably it's geared towards women, but I think there probably are tips and advice in there for everybody. And then the other one is Give and Take by Adam Grant. I really enjoy that book. This question about women in the workplace, intersectionality, being the only person of color, it often counsels us to set really specific boundaries about what we take on and don't take on. But as young professionals early in your career, I think it can often be very important to say yes to opportunities in your workplace and be somebody who gets things done, make yourself invaluable. The Adam Grant book has some really good research in it that explains why people who give at work, and that's kind of the fundamental piece that I'm talking about, end up being more successful. They build stronger networks, and they can navigate their own path. So those two books have had a big impact on me.
I'm going to be honest. I'm not a big fan of business books. I just can't get through them. I've tried. I have a million of them on my bookshelf. I'm not going to lie. I look at them. I have not gotten through a single one all the way through. Now, that being said, there are chapters that I've read of certain books that have definitely left an imprint. The Blue Ocean Strategy was a Harvard Business Review book. I read several chapters of that. I found it entertaining. I thought it was interesting. I also, from a business perspective, really kind of focused in on that as like an anchor and kind of driving message for myself as I approach business, and kind of from a team perspective, when I talk to my team and help motivate them, is look for the blue ocean that you can swim in, right? Where no one else is swimming in, carve it out, find it, and get in there. So I think that was really interesting. The Tipping Point I read when I was right out of college. I think that was right when Malcolm Gladwell was like really peaking in terms of popularity. I actually read that one all the way through. I love those examples and case studies that he gave. And I think that kind of provokes thought in a different way. There are definitely various TED Talks that I've watched, none that I can name off top, to be honest. I'm very fascinated about how body language contributes to everything that we do. And there are definitely some TED Talks that I've seen about just kind of how you posture yourself before you give a presentation can make you feel that much stronger and confident in kind of your delivery. And then I think in general, I love reading fiction. Like I love reading Murakami. He's a Japanese writer. And what I love about it is it's all about his imagination. And I think for me, and especially in my role, and I think it's different for everyone, but I am paid to have to be creative, which is a really difficult position to be in, because when you consider yourself a creative, to have to do that on demand can be really stunting, right? That's why the term writer's block exists, because it happens to everyone. Now, I'm definitely not a writer, but I think being able to escape into other worlds and other areas of imagination help stimulate my own imagination, and that inspires me. So attending different panels, watching different TED Talks. I used to go all the time in person to different events where I may know nothing about the subject matter. It could be something about science and biology. It could be about art, but I would just go and open my mind up to these new things. And I found that really has helped me the most, is just kind of getting inspiration from wherever I can get it, and just kind of tapping into other great creative minds. It helps in conversations as well. For me, I have to talk to a lot of different people from a lot of different backgrounds and find a way to relate to them. And so being able to tap into like these little nuggets of information and knowledge that I've gained from these various different sources has helped me find a common ground for me to have a conversation with these folks. So probably not a traditional answer, but that's the truth.
I'm going to try to get in one last question from our chat group before we end for today. This is for everyone. What internal work did you find yourself having to perform in order to be the best version of yourself? And I'll give you a second to think about that, and then we will start with Donna.
I'm not sure I understand the question, quite honestly. So I'm gonna punt.
All right, does somebody want to tackle this question? What internal work have you done on yourself in order to become a better leader?
Okay.
I mean, I'll jump in. I think continuous learning is always important to keep your mind open, as Alex just said, to always be willing to improve yourself, to not think that you know it all and that you've arrived, but to continually learn. Most companies have extensive training programs in place now, and it's very easy to just log into a class and to learn about something that you may not know. For example, I was not always the greatest at Excel because, to be quite honest, I had people who would do that for me. And then I got into a role where I needed to do my own spreadsheets. And I was like, oh, wait a minute, I can't really do this. So I was able to find some classes online and to kind of teach myself Excel. And it was a smooth transition. My manager never even knew that I wasn't able to do it in the beginning. So I would just say continuous learning, continually trying to make yourself better. And like Alex said, open your mind to different things always helps.
I echo all of that as well. And I think for me personally, stepping into the corporate world was a major shift for me, and corporate politics are very much at play. And so I had to really do the work of not playing into that and don't believe the hype and don't play those games. It's not for everyone. Some people thrive and enjoy playing those kind of inner political games. It's not for me. And so for me, I really had to focus on maintaining my integrity. So, remaining who I am at the core is a daily effort that has to be put forth, especially when you're thrown into environments that are male dominated, or where you're a lesser voice in the crowd, and just figuring out ways to kind of stand out and make myself known and heard without compromising that integrity, which they give you many opportunities to do so throughout your career. And for me, that was the hard work that I had to do, was to never allow those folks to kind of get into the back of my head and let me step outside of myself.
Yeah, and I think for me, the internal work I had to do most recently was around the concept of what got you here won't get you there, right? So for those of us who move into leadership, especially for women and people who have other identities that make the workplace more challenging for them, we have to work really hard to get into leadership roles often. We overcome spaces where we are the only person in the room, all these things happen. And then suddenly we're there. And it changes, we are in leadership roles. We have a much bigger influence on the culture of the organization we're in ways that we didn't before. And suddenly figuring out who we are as leaders shifts dramatically in that moment. And when it happened for me, I wasn't really prepared. It meant taking a deep dive into my personal leadership philosophy. What was I trying to accomplish? What did it mean to lead at a high level? My personal success. We heard a lot today from all of our panelists about why the work you do to be personally accountable and successful in that early part of your career is so important. And suddenly you move into a role where you're evaluated more on the success of the people who work for you, and you're expected to cultivate that and really, celebrate the successes of the people who work for you. So the work I needed to do was to unpack what got me here, right? We all have a story about the challenges we overcame that got us here. And I needed to unpack that first before I could really think about what it meant to be in this role and how I was going to try and be the best leader of people I could be. It's been a good journey, but it was not completely easy.
I'll say this, that and I've always thought that this was really very important, but when you ask about what kind of, inner work that I do, it's the work that I do for myself, right? And so there are a lot of situations that I find myself in daily where I will reflect on that conversation later on in the day and try to understand from the other person's perspective how it is that I appear to them. So it's about presenting myself and doing so professionally and providing information and insight and talking to somebody as a human being. So I always want to make sure, was I considerate of that person's feelings? Was I considerate of the work that they had done and evaluating it and saying, okay, here's where you went wrong. Here's what you need to do to improve it next time. But doing it from the perspective of somebody who wants to help those that are on my team perform better, to do a good job, that at the end of the day, they feel happy and content that they were able to do the things that they were supposed to do. And how do I help them with that? By mentoring them, by working with them and having that voice that comes and coming at them from the perspective of, I'm here to support you. That's my job. I'm here to support you. And have I done that correctly? And I often reflect on that to make sure that I'm doing it the right way.
That self-reflection is so important. I want to thank you guys for being here today and for answering our questions. I'm going to ask Amanda Mallon from the Career and Professional Development Office to join and give our students their last bit of instructions.
Yes, and I just want to echo Lauren's thank you to all of our panelists. We really appreciate you taking time out of the middle of your day to come and help us celebrate International Women's Day and share your stories and your tips and strategies with all of us. If our students could please give our panelists a round of virtual applause and gratitude. We really appreciate you being here. I am going to turn it over to Serena now to ask our students just to share your feedback. If you wouldn't mind, we would appreciate you doing this.
Definitely. So thank you again for everyone who joined and all of our panelists for sharing their information regarding their career paths and their leadership roles. Right now, you should be able to see the program evaluation. If you cannot, can you, I guess, do like a thumbs down in the reactions? Okay. So given that I don't see any thumbs down, you should be able to see the program eval. I do not see that anyone has started filling that out yet. So if you do see it, please take the time to fill it out. It's a very short evaluation. We really value your feedback. We want to make sure that you're getting a lot of valuable information, especially as we move on and create future programs. We want to make sure that you're interested and you stay engaged, because all of this is very important information.
Yeah, so as an update, we are at 27 of the 39 participants have.
Okay, I just can't see it.
I got you.
Thank you.
So, yes, absolutely. So those remaining 13 participants, if you could please fill out the poll, that would be so amazing. And we really appreciate you all for being here. We know some folks may be running off to class.
Definitely.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for coming out. And we hope to see you at all of our future events.
Yes, everyone enjoy the rest of your day.
All right.
Thank you for having me.